A very, very good evening. Warm welcome to Royal Johannesburg and Kensington, soon to just be Royal Johannesburg, home of, amongst other things, the Dan Nicholl Show Invitational. When I'm not on my far more important wine show and we're mucking about with the Dan Nicholl Show, this is an annual event which we have to raise money for the Laureate Sport for Good Foundation, to have some fun on a world-class pair of golf courses, and to hang out with some of the people who are part of the show. And every year we have guests who come along and they buy 3 balls and they then get a celebrity fourth. We've had some great guests joining us today, from Maps Mapanyane to Jason Goliath, national cricket captain Dean Elgar, Chris Morris has been here, Vaynant Olivier, Okonan Dungani, Brian Mitchell, the boxer, Soldier Boy, the fighter, a couple of Olympians, including gold medalist James Thompson, Joey Rasdeen, Mark Williams, Stanton Fredericks, Fabian McCarthy. It's been a really cool list of people supporting the day and allowing us to make some money for Laureate and have some fun along the way. So what on earth then are we doing having a wine show here? Well, at the end of the day, we normally have a couple of glasses, and it was a pretty good opportunity to bring some of the people from today in front of camera and get a slightly different spin on the world of wine, and especially from our sports stars, finding out how it fits into the lives they either lead or have led. Were they able to have a glass of wine now and again during the course of their careers, or was it a strict no-no? If they could have some, where were some of the cool places they had wine? What were some of the best stuff they drank? I think there'll be 1 or 2 wine stories to look out for. We've also got some guests who know a little bit more about wine, and one of them will be joining me in just a moment. A regular friend of Dan Really Likes Wine, the global chairman of Great Domains, Derek Kilpin, will be with me in just a second. Before we chat to him, though, not so much the news this week, but just a quick reminder of something rather important coming up. So here it is. All right, well, I promised you somebody rather important. We have somebody rather important, looking resplendent in his annual golf outfit, Derek Kilpin. Most of the time spent selling fine wine to people at vastly overinflated prices. Today, what looked like a vastly overinflated scorecard. Surely can't have been right. You didn't really have that many shots out there today, did you?
Yeah, so I think Dean Elgar's coming after me, and I raised my bet today. So that's I think I do it every year, but great day out. We had a really cool 4-ball. Definitely wasn't about quality of golf, but yeah, good day out. I actually haven't had any wine today. We had a couple of beers, but always a special day to be a part of.
And it's a day where we see golf and wine come together, because after the round, most people are having a glass, as many will through the course of tonight. And especially in South Africa, it is quite a strong link. We've got whether it's people like Ernie Elser directly involved, or someone like Kleiner Zalzer that's got a wine estate right next door to a golf course. Historically, there's been a pretty strong relationship between golf and wine.
Yeah, well, I almost think it's like the old school tradition of people doing golf days and that whole corporate thing. And I think it's almost, I mean, you obviously facilitate this and put on today, but I think it's something that almost feels like it's coming back. I mean, people are playing paddle and cycling and things like that, but I think golf has a natural place for the 19th hole and having a great glass of not just beer and gin and tonic, and a great glass of wine at the end of a shocking hole of 18 holes of golf. But yeah.
You sell a bit of South African wine, but your main focus is international, specifically French wine. Some of the best French wine that comes into South Africa comes via Great Domains. Is there a golf and wine link in France? Is it something that goes together?
Yeah, well, if you saw my score today, I'm not hugely familiar with sort of the golfing aspect of France, but I think, I mean, we've chatted about Lanson and tennis and Wimbledon and things like that, but yeah, so no big golfing links with sort of some of the estates that we work with, but I probably haven't dug deep enough, to be honest.
Well, look, I know that the specialty is slightly more wine than golf, so let's have a quick chat about that. It's lovely to have you on the show for the first time this year, on the back of what was a really busy year for Great Domains for 2022. I think you, with a lot of the rest of the industry, really bounced back in terms of the wine world being back where it once was. And it was headlined by a trip that actually had me unfollow you on social media for a while, because you went off to Burgundy And even by your standards of cool stuff you've done, that was a pretty awesome adventure.
Yeah, I mean, it was back into our normal routine. We're normally in Burgundy. I mean, it's the biggest part of our business, the part that we're probably most passionate about. And it was the start of the business, is what we started importing was Burgundy. And we're there every December in the sort of worst time of year to be there, when it's cold and there's no other tourists. So generally the producers have got time for you. So it had been basically 3 years since we had been there. So we had to basically pack it in and make sure we saw everyone. And we've grown the portfolio a little bit. So it meant an extra trip, extra tasting, which for those sitting at home think it's a big holiday, but it's huge fun and it's a privilege. But it's 8 a.m, it's sort of -3 degrees in a cellar, and you're tasting 100 wines a day. And it's not that sort of long lunches and big long dinners. It's sort of quite work orientated, but so the social media side is probably not as accurate as you would have seen, but it was huge fun, but not a holiday.
In terms of this trip to Burgundy, what was new, what excited you, and what out of that trip is now going to be coming into South Africa for the first time?
So it was probably, I think, our most special trip that we've been on, just because of the changes, not all good changes, some positive, some negative with Burgundy. It's probably the most sought after region in the world, and as a result of that, prices have gone through the roof, which isn't great for anyone who wants to buy wine. So we just had to sort of recalibrate not only our palates but our sort of perspective on what's going on in the region. And I think one of the things that we also focused on, other than seeing the regular producers and reconnecting, was to see where there might be some opportunity a bit further south, a bit further north of sort of the main heartland of Burgundy. And that's what we did. So we went and had some real fun going to wine shops, buying bottles, reading, making phone calls, and then sort of organizing tastings with new people. Not to go and import another 20 estates, but just to sort of find some really sweet spot estates. And ironically, probably maybe a year behind everyone else, because we hadn't been traveling there, and already people are going into those little sort of more less known regions like Santenay and Marange, and places which aren't necessarily mainstream, like a Gervais Chambertin or Merceau. And already those little producers are saying, we don't have wine. There's not enough wine. We've already got people knocking on the door. So we managed to almost break the door down on 2 little estates. And so we will be getting those in later this year, which will be the 2021 vintage. But yeah, so that was the excitement, finding new ones, but it's difficult, not easy.
You're bringing the wine into a country that makes some pretty decent wine itself. You're also bringing it into a country which doesn't have the strongest currency in the world, which would suggest, okay, you're bringing wine in from France. We've got to pay for a euro-based wine in rand. This must mean there are quite a lot of people who are still really keen to get their hands on world-class Burgundy.
Yeah, well, I think that's the trick with this whole importing thing, and we've had chats about it before. I mean, I'm a huge patriot, but we import wine. We also work with South African wine. So if you're going to import wine, it needs to tell a story, be different, offer something unique. And I think the finest wines in Burgundy can do that. And maybe we believe there's a premium that's worth paying, not all the time. And everyone's got to discover their own sort of palates and where their sort of threshold is. And again, that's probably why we went looking out for sort of, we wanted to find 1 or 2 domains which would, people would think very differently about the current sort of atmosphere in Burgundy, which is to talk about value, which is not a word you sort of find that easily in Burgundy because of where the prices have got to. Where finding it, importing it, paying that exchange rate, the wine is going to be 500 Rand a bottle or whatever it is, and it's going to push our very best Pinots to the brink in terms of having them next to each other. So maybe we should try that next time. But that's the idea, to not just import for the sake of importing. It needs to tell a story and be worth it. Otherwise it's not worth it. Yeah.
So on that question then of value, you mentioned 500 Rand. Is that kind of the price point we're looking at something that combines really good quality with, by French standards, once it's been imported, a fair price?
Yeah, so I mean, I started to do some rough calculations, and sort of from 500-600 Rand to find something that's really good. I maybe not Grand Cru in Gevrey-Chambertin, but something that's really authentic, that tastes of Burgundy, that's super elegant, and that you want to drink lots of. So at that price point, that's where you can, even at the weak exchange rate, you can start finding that. But it's not easy. It's not like we bring in pallets of the stuff, because even those examples, I mean, we've got one email yesterday from the guy that we've been chasing, and it's 90 bottles. So if we actually went and did the sums of all the effort that gets put in, it's probably not particularly viable in that sense, but it is getting added on to sort of the whole Burgundy thrust that we do anyway. So it's easy to justify, and it's also important that we do this work for people that are passionate about Pinot Noir and Chardonnay, and find these things and bring them in, and then people can decide whether it was worth it or not, and I believe it is.
So that's Burgundy. It's a big part of what you do. It's not the only part of what you do. Before I ask you about South Africa, in terms of the other wine from both other areas of France and other parts of Europe, is there anything else that's new on the horizon for this year?
Yeah, it's one of these funny things where we always sit at the beginning of the year and say, okay, it's enough. The portfolio is X number of producers, and we want to make sure we're doing as good a job for these producers as possible. But it's hard not to want to find the next great thing in a certain region or another country. So Champagne is a region that we've always loved and been super passionate about since the beginning. And there's one or two estates that we're looking at in Champagne, sort of on the grower side of things. And one or two in the south. It's Burgundy, and then trying to work with a few more Bordeaux estates, which everyone, if they think Great Domains and Bordeaux, they don't often think the two immediately are said after each other. But there's a huge opportunity in Bordeaux, I think, with trying to find estates that are, number one, great quality, nice people, and who are willing to sell the wines directly to importers, which is very opposite to how the whole region works, because it all gets sold through middlemen in France, in Bordeaux, the plus, as it's called, the négociants. And we're sort of finding that there's certain estates that are willing to buck the trend and stop and not work through this 100-year-old or 100-year-old plus structure of selling through négociants. And so that's what we're looking out for, like smaller Bordeaux estates who are happy to work directly, where you can actually have a lunch and shake the guy's or girl's hand who owns their estate, as opposed to working through a négociant who do a great job, but it's way less personal. And you know what wine's like, and all the connections and friends you've made, it's about making exactly that, connections, friends, and enjoying it. So it's much easier to do that when it's direct. So.
Joining us on our special edition of Dan Really Likes Wine from Royal Johannesburg, it is Derek Kilpin, fresh off a big 100 in today's golf day, and discussing some wine. Before asking about South Africa, there's some more South Africans on our way in just a moment. Chris Morris and Dean Elgar will be with us. Dean, the former current South African Test captain, and I think he might be a former champion here. Chris Morris is definitely a former champion, so Chris will be with us in just a moment as well. South African wine. If I look at the people you look after, it's probably easier to get hold of Romani Conti out of you than it is Eben Sadi. Such is the demand for the wine he makes. But you've also got people like Chris Alheit, guys like Jean Smit, David and Nadia, people whose wine is now pretty much sold out on allocation, which is obviously great for your business, great for them. They're selling wine quickly. What does it say about where we are wine-wise that we've now got these producers for whom the allocation system is now pretty much enough to sell all of their wine? Is that a sign of the maturity of the South African wine market to a degree?
Yeah, well, I think it's the maturity of the market, number one, and also the quality of the wine has changed / improved a lot. I mean, if I think back to the early days, which we can say now after 20 years of Great Domains, that right at the beginning it wasn't necessarily an immediate consideration to work with South African wines, only because it had started being an import company. But where South African wine was 20 years ago is vastly different to where it is now, purely based on quality. So maturity of the market, and certainly a massive increase in quality, which I think we all have been exposed to and we're benefiting from, whether we're drinking it, selling it, buying it. And it's a good thing. And I think that the more that it happens in an authentic and real way, where it's about quality, and let's say it's about quality, then that's what the objective's got to be. So I guess with us, we try and work with all these producers and do the job where we make sure we sell whatever we can or whatever they give us. And then that's our catalyst to maybe look for another producer, because you don't want to just build a portfolio for the sake of it and someone's not doing their job. So that's the way we try and build it, is sell it all and then look for the next big thing.
Anybody new South African wise on the horizon for this year?
Potentially one estate, but it's still in the pipeline, but it's not something we are actively seeking. We're comfortable with the group of guys and girls that we've got, but if there's something really special, then we sort of at least get the ball rolling, and it might be something that takes a year or two, which we're happy to wait, like all good things in wine. So nothing immediate. So we just want to make sure we're looking after the people we have made agreements and commitments to.
All right, well, keep us posted. Let's do that Burgundy versus Pinot Noir tasting in the next little while. I'd love to do that. And we'll look forward to seeing who your top secret new addition is, and try some of that new Burgundy as well. And in between, and I say this from a very special place in my heart, maybe just an hour or two on the range before next year's golf day.
I think that'll be done. We've just got to crack 100, we were far from that today.
All right, Derek, thanks very much for joining
Dan.
us. Derek Kilpin, who is the global chairman of Great Domains, who is joining us today, played at our Dan Nicholl Show Invitational here at Royal Johannesburg, with a bit of perspective on some of the wine coming up. So we're going to a couple of cricketers next up, and the first of them is a man he's a good friend of mine. He's an extraordinarily talented golfer. He's also the man who attracted the greatest ever transfer fee in the history of South African cricket at the IPL, when he moved over for a sum that should allow him to build up a nice Burgundy collection, should he so wish. And we've also got joining us, apologies there, that's just a very noisy Derek Kilpin in the background. We've also got our national test captain, Dean Elgar. Join us, gentlemen, jump in and welcome. Lovely to have you both.
Hello, Dan.
I think with one on either side, that booming Free State baritone.
You're loud enough as it is. Yeah.
Shit, thank you. How was today? How was today on the golf course?
Golf is golf, Dan. I've been beaten today, so we'll leave it at that.
Dean?
Mine was good.
Yeah.
It was actually quite nice once to play half decent. But you're never gonna conquer golf, I'm afraid. It's always gonna clean you up.
But before we ask you about wine, which is a slightly more important part on a wine show, how frustrating is it for you guys as professional sportsmen who are used to walking out into the middle and either grinding down an attack for 7 hours or carting poor bowlers all over the place? You do it effortlessly and you do it brilliantly. Now you're playing in a different sport and it's just a little bit more challenging. How frustrating is that transition?
Well, for me, I've actually quite enjoyed it, because it's very similar to cricket in the way that conditions change every day. So like we play a 4-day game and the conditions will be different every single day. The grass would have grown, or the weather would have changed, or the wind would have changed, or something like that. But golf's exactly the same. You can play the same course for 4 days in a row and the conditions would have changed and it'll be a different challenge. So that's where I've really enjoyed playing golf. It's kept me mentally frustrated and mentally sharp, I think. But also it's a seriously challenging sport, as we know. So it keeps the mind fresh, especially after retirement.
Dean?
For me, it's just about getting out. I don't really care too much about the result that happens on the course, but I think as sportsmen, we still got that competitive nature, and you want to obviously do well in something else. But for me, it's all about getting out, meeting new people, which is something I'm not always comfortable with. But as I'm getting older, I'm starting to grow to like people, and I realized after cricket, you need them in your life. So yeah, for me, it's not too much about just being better. It's just about getting out there and networking more. And obviously, if you play a good round, everyone gets to hear that. So yeah.
Also gives you the chance to have a nice glass of wine after the round of golf, which leads to having you on Dan Really Likes Wine. I remember doing an interview a few years ago with David Gower, and he spoke about one of the Ashes tours that had to England, where one, I think it might have been Ian Botham, had arranged a Bollinger champagne scholarship, and they basically spent the entire tour drinking champagne. It sounded fantastic. It also sounded though like it was a slightly bygone era, because I'd imagine that's probably not how tours work today. Are they though completely teetotal affairs, Dean, or will you feel comfortable having the occasional glass of wine during a tour?
Are you asking the right person?
Yeah, you are.
Be honest, I was like, asking the right person.
Dan, I'm a little bit old school when it comes to that. I'm definitely very much pro having a glass of wine or even whatever beverage after a day's play. I think it's a perfect opportunity to chat and just to unwind, especially if it's been a really dark day in the dirt. So yeah, I've got a little bit more of an old school mentality when it comes to that, and I'm pretty sure Chris feels similar in that way, if not exactly the same. So yeah, it's I think it's a vice that most sports people have, and it's not to overindulge; it's just really to unwind.
Yeah, 100% the same. So I mean, on the practice for many years on tour, we had a wine club. And I'm sure there'll be a lot more players that can tell you about it. But we used to have it. There was a wine club and a whiskey club. I wasn't in the whiskey club, but I made sure I was in the wine club. And what we used to do is we used to bring a bottle of wine, either bring a bottle of wine with you, or where you are in the country, you would buy a bottle of wine. And then what you would do is you'd promo your wine, you'd explain about it. And a lot of the time you'd make up what's in the wine because you don't really know. But exactly, it was just to talk a little bit of rubbish. But the wine club we used to go strong. And it was led by Faf du Plessis, believe it or not, because we know he loves this wine. But yeah, no, I'm with Dean. You need to not necessarily overindulge, but you need to have that unwinding process. And for me, what I used to do is after a day's play, because there's a fast bowler, or medium pace bowler, you would always have to bowl the last couple of overs of the day. And with that, you would obviously be cooked by the end of the day. And our physio would always know in my locker, I would always have 2 beverages waiting for me, probably beers, waiting for me. And by the time I would get to my locker with the beers, I would have no clothing on. And Dean can attest to this. I'm a very big fan of not having kit on in the change room because then my body needs to breathe. It's not a great sight, but I mean, listen, not all the oil paintings are beautiful. But anyway, each to their own. Mona Lisa ain't pretty. She's not even smiling. But yeah, so that was our thing. So it was just an unwinding process. And like Dean said, you don't overindulge. Sometimes you do because you need to have a massive release of whatever you need to. But I think it's important because it does create a little bit of spirit in the team, and a lot of honesty comes out when things like that do happen. So I'm a big believer in it.
You mentioned Faf. I'll get random messages from him when he's on tour, not to tell me about a cricket match or how he thinks training's gone. He'll tell me he's just been visiting Penfolds in South Australia and had a terrific day out, or found something great on a wine list. Have I tried it before? He's got this real passion for exploring wine, has his own label, of course. Is that something you would have done, Dean, has gone out and found great wine at restaurants or gone on a wine tour? Or was that part of the adventure of being on tour?
Yeah, no doubt. Especially like you get opportunity to go to New Zealand and Australia. People maybe don't know much about their wines and the industry that they have here, which is quite significant in Australia. And I've been fortunate enough to go to Penfolds as well with Poopy, and yeah, they really lay it on there for you, and you obviously get to taste the different wines that they have in their stable, and yeah, it's nice. And obviously we're blessed in South Africa to have the best wines in the world, and yeah, it's nice to just experience what other countries and cultures have to offer. So yeah, I've been fortunate enough to experience a few of those kind of trips, and yeah, hopefully they continue in the future. So yeah, it's nice to get out there and just see what else is there.
Is that a shared interest for you, Chris?
It would be. I mean, I never ever drank wine before my wife. She is a massive red wine drinker, so she actually introduced the wine. I mean, I'm more about the burnt wine myself. Comes in a slightly darker bottle, so
Dirty Coke.
a dirty Coke, correct. But yeah, so obviously my wife would be drinking a lot of wine, and slowly but surely I got into it. And yeah, the Penfolds trip is a good one. I mean, it's, all of us, you dress up for the occasion, you wear the collared shirt, you dress quite well, and then du Plessis would arrive in a vest and some skinnies and spray on clothing. So no, he was always the one. I mean, especially with him and food, with wine pairing. So you'd always follow him. He'd always book the best restaurants. I mean, even though you had to pay a whole RPL contract to afford dinner that night. Faf would always take us to the best spots in terms of food, but they'd always pair us with good wine. So, slowly but surely over the years, my wine flavor or taste has gotten a little bit better. But yeah, I can honestly say South African wines for me are the number one. I'm a massive Optima fan. You know this. I've got a few of them in my cellar. waiting for a good rainy day. But yeah, our wines are spectacular, so we're very lucky and
You
fortunate.
don't need rain to open that. You can just
Not anymore, Dean. As you can see by this belly, not anymore, boy.
So if I come around to the Morrises, I'm gathering that Lisa is sommelier in chief.
Yes.
What's likely to be open then? Is it a bottle of Optima?
It would be an Optima. I've got a Grange from Penfolds waiting for me in the cellar as well. But I've got a 750 ml, almost I think it's a 1 liter, one of those big puppies, not 1 liter. What are they called? Those big ones. No, bigger than a Magnum. Comes in that big box that Lisa bought me.
5 liters.
It's I think it's a 5
Durable.
liter that that Lisa bought for me for my retirement. It's one of those Rupert and Rothschild. Can't remember what it's called, but it's got a blue label. But it's quite a special one.
Baron Edmund.
Probably that one. You're probably right, but that would probably be the one that we'd open because, as far as I know, with you drinking wine, you'd have half of it at least. So that would be the one that we'd open.
Very happily so.
Yeah,
But yeah, so like I said, probably a lot of Optima because I've got a lot of them, and yeah, that's my favorite. So.
All right. Well, it speaks to a very particular style of wine, very popular one. What about the Elgers? If I swing by for dinner,
there you'll find a lot of different wines there. My missus actually belongs to a wine club, and they're fortunate enough to have quite a few wine farms come in. We also go to tastings at restaurants in Pretoria, which has become quite a popular thing. But for me, I can't say there's a standout wine. We've got a lot of good wines at home. I think it's all about the palate and what you can tolerate. And as you're getting older, your palate changes a hell of a lot. And I'd like to say my style has changed a lot. I think a Pinot and a Grenache wasn't really a lot like words that you'll mention in the wine industry in South Africa now.
You only learned that when you came to Pretoria from Bloemer.
Yeah, it must have been.
Can you spell them yet?
I think it was on the N1 when I went through Bosnia. I told you.
100%.
But I mean, those are just two that stand out from something that we don't know about, and it's obviously a growing culture that those wines are providing now. And I can't say I've got a standout. I'd like to think my palate is quite open to quite a few different wines.
I'm often asked about favorite wine experience, and I think it's similar to probably questions you guys get about a favorite innings or a favorite win, where it's often something that's quite personal. It's maybe not just I scored the most runs. There was something really cool to it. And although I've been to all sorts of amazing places, I remember a particular dinner in Mendoza, sitting on the first floor of a bodega, looking out to the snow-capped Andes, drinking Malbec, eating steak. Is it the best wine I've ever had? No. Is it the best wine experience? It probably is. So I'll ask you guys both that same question. Is there a wine experience over a dinner or a visit somewhere that stands out as being something that was really special to you?
So I've got two, Dan. My one would definitely be at Penfolds. It was the big Melbourne Cup in Australia. So the whole country shuts down, as you know, and they do their betting and they dress up to wherever they go in Penfolds. A lot of people would have booked tables there, and Faf managed to book us a table at Penfolds for the Melbourne Cup, and we watched the races. I know nothing about horse racing, but the horses were on, people were dressed up, it was festive, we were having wine, and we happened to beat Australia that series. So that was also lekker. But my other one is, believe it or not, as I'm not promoting anyone here, but my retirement dinner I had with the Stones, we had at Marble. And I can't tell you what wine we had. I can't, because obviously I'd been celebrating a good career for the last couple of the week going into that dinner. The palate was gone, but as you say, it was the moment. We'd ordered a massive steak, myself and Brandon, and the girls were eating what they had, but we shared a bottle of wine that night, and I'll be honest with you, I cannot remember what it was, but the moment itself for me was an unforgettable one, so that'll always stick with me.
Special night. In fact, I remember that because you and Brandon video called me, and it was the first time I realized you both speak Hungarian.
Yeah, speaking
Hungarian.
yeah, we were speaking a bit of lawnmower there, but it's all right. A bit of weed eater.
Special occasions. What about you, Dave?
I've obviously experienced like craft in the Cape. Wine pairing, wine tasting with food over there. That's also amazing. Another thing, you get to see the mountains in the background, which you don't have in Pretoria or Gauteng. So that's also like, it's almost like you're not in South Africa. It's like a pinch me kind of moment, just to have the backdrop and some unbelievably good wines and some good food pairings. And then the Penfolds one is up there as well. Different country, different cuisines, wines that you've never ever come across. Also kind of cool to experience. We had a favorite restaurant in Victoria called Tin Roof. They've sadly closed down now, but they used to do a Sarensburg wine tasting and pairing, which was also right up there, and the food was amazing. Sadly, they closed now, which is not great. So, there's been a few occasions, but those are just a few that I can really put my finger on.
The opportunity to find somewhere new and
I
go
agree
and
with you. I
explore.
think we need to take this chat to the Western Cape. And we can
I think we should go to the West Indies. What do you think, Dan? We should find some wine tasting Indies. There we go.
And that is actually an interesting question, because if you, for those of us who maybe haven't spent much time over there, the view of the West Indies is lots of cocktails, lots of rum, that Caribbean feel to it.
That is true.
I was about to say, you're spot on there, Dan. You're spot on.
Yeah. I wouldn't imagine. I've spent a little bit of time in Grenada, a little bit of time in Tobago. There wasn't an awful lot of wine that came across my horizon.
No, I think the heat's got a lot to do with it, and the tropical feel about it. A rum punch is a glorious thing to drink. The first 3 sips is like drinking diesel. But after that, it's the best drink you've ever had in your life. Then you feel glorious. You feel glorious afterwards. But no, I'm sure there would be a lot of wine. Another West Indian players, like a lot of the guys actually drink wine. But yeah, I can't say I saw a lot.
I haven't heard a lot of.
Yeah, I know of one, but I'm not gonna name drop. But yeah, there was one specific player that I know who collects wine and always imports it over there. So.
And Cretan wine go back a long way. There are a lot of guys involved one way or another. Alan Lamb is responsible for 80% of all wine consumption in England at the moment. Ian Botham's got his own rosé. There are a lot of guys like Mahela Jayawardena is one of the great wine collectors.
Sangakkara's got a massive collection.
Actually, it was Sangakkara, not Mahela, that's right. Yeah. So there are a lot of guys who've got an interest, which leads me to the final one before we let you guys slip away and collect all your prizes for today's golf. I won't ask you to include yourselves in this, just so there's no ill feeling. But if you could pick 4 guys from the cricket world to have a wine dinner with some semblance of wine being the link, they enjoy their wine, they collect it, you'd just love to have a glass of wine with them, who would that quartet be?
Currents or
anybody you like.
So you need 4 more. So we're the 5th.
4 more, yes.
Okay, you can go first, Dean.
Well, one's a current, and I know he loves his wine. He maybe doesn't look like he enjoys his wine, but he's also a massive foodie. People don't know this about him, but Simon Harmer.
Really?
He's also unbelievable entertainment.
With food, yeah.
Once he gets going, he's an absolute character, and I would say he would be one of the guys that I would invite along for one of those kind of moments. I have to think now, because there's a lot of guys out there.
A lot of guys would want to take with. So, I mean, off the top of the head, Australia would go Faf because he's the wine expert and the foodie as well. Simon Harmer's a great shot. I think he would definitely be in my 4. I would have to include Kumar Sangakkara just because of his knowledge of wine, and he's just a brilliant human being and an absolute ripper. So I'd have to have him with. But for a little bit of entertainment,
I think another guy, maybe he's not everyone's favourite, purely because he's from Australia, is maybe a guy like Matthew Hayden. Because I mean, he's also achieved a hell of a lot in the game, and I think he's also into it as well, because he's also a massive foodie, and you always see on Instagram he's cooking up chow with a glass of something there. And
I'm on a WhatsApp group with him, and he pops up bottles of really nice wine
every now and then.
He would also be great entertainment, and I think his stories would be up there with some of the best.
My 4th would have to be another Australian, would have to be Ricky Ponting, because he's obviously got his own wine, but also the story factor is absolute gem. So if you had him and Kumar bouncing with each other, with myself and Harmer obviously being the looks at the table, it creates some serious vibe, and then Faf rounding up with his spray-on clothing. So he'd probably be cooking the food, wouldn't he?
I think obviously a guy like the late Shane Warne would be also right up there. Can you imagine the stories that guy has? I think he's obviously one of those guys that's been lost to a lot of cricketers where he could have been adding a lot of value and influence. And obviously he was known for his late night glasses of wine.
Who won he? No,
Never.
No, absolutely spot on. That's a legend.
There's actually too many guys that feel like most of them you want good content when it comes to storytelling.
Yeah.
The guy that's been around is a legend. They are legends of the game, and obviously, just trying to add value to your life, I guess. There's a few.
No, there's quite a few names to name. I reckon you do the 2015 Titans cricket team, you'd have a good evening out. I can promise you that much. You put all those guys in one room. Oh.
Yeah.
There's some great.
It will be a late one.
Don't do anything too early the next day. There's some great chats there. I was lucky enough to have a number of late night glasses with Warnie, and he was one of the great entertainers. He really, really was. And somebody I might throw in, who I actually had dinner with last week, who's got a forensic interest in wine, would be Stephen Fleming.
Stephen Fleming, yeah, you're right. He's one of those first 11 guys, isn't he?
Yeah, he is.
One of the originals, yeah.
Together with AB and Mike Hussey.
Yeah, Flem would be good.
Yeah, the list you could rattle on for an hour, I think, just with regards to this topic.
So it's our dinner for 100 at the Morris's then.
100%.
Well, just to one of your connections that you always brag about on Instagram. So maybe you can just chuck out a lifeline there to some of the boys and off you go.
Anyway, we'd all do a golf to St Andrews and have it there at Jurassic. What do you
We'll
think?
sort out a flight to Cape Town.
Well, actually, we do have some wine tasting to do because I know we've kind of informally mentioned it, but the previous guest on the show was Derek Kilpin, the man behind Great Domains, who look after some of South Africa's finest wine, but also bring in some extraordinary wine from principally Burgundy, but also from Bordeaux and some other parts of Europe. And Derek is a cricket tragic. He's one of the guys who does get up at 2 o'clock in the morning to watch brief innings and loves the game. And so he's made an offer, and I know we've had a bit of a chat about it, but we're going to this evening sit down with Derek, confirm that date, because he'd love to do a wine tasting, have you guys come along and introduce you to some pretty special wine and share a few more
Which
stories.
country do we need our visas for then?
No, we'll start off in Johannesburg. And,
Sounds like you can pay for those guys.
look, there is a little rugby tournament in France next year, and in fact, 17th of September, South Africa play Romania in Bordeaux. So it might not be the biggest game to go to, but gee, that's a great location to head to.
And then from there, we travel straight from there and we go to the Ryder Cup in Rome. I'm just saying.
I'll be at the Dunhill next week. But
What
where, of course, you were last year as well.
I was last year, correct, yes.
Brandon Stone's security.
Yeah.
Guys, lovely to have you on from a Dan Nicholl show side of things. Thank you very much for supporting the show and for being here for the golf today. And from a Dan Really Likes Wine show, big thing we love to do is to diversify the world of wine and tell some stories that often aren't told. And to be able to do that with the both of you has been a real treat. So thank you both very much indeed.
Thank you, Dan. Appreciate it.
And we might find a glass or two of wine later on this evening.
Absolutely. Be rude not to.
Give us a driver.
Well, you can use mine. It's just a bit skewed.
Oh dear. So there we go. Slightly different edition of Dan Really Likes Wine this week. We're going to slip out now. We've got some prize giving to do and an auction, and all of that is in support of the Laureus Sport for Good Foundation. And if you don't know too much about it, go onto the internet, have a bit of a look. It is an incredible space that around the world uses the power of sport to affect sustainable change and make lives of young people just a little more hopeful, a little more inspired, and doing a wonderful job therein. We're very proud to support that today through the Dan Nicholl Show, and also very happy to bring Dan Really Likes Wine along to Royal Johannesburg, home of the Old Oak. I was there for lunch yesterday. Chef Ransley doing a terrific job, and their wine list is just getting better and better and better. We're going to be running through some of that wine this evening. I'll be back with you on Thursday. The show comes to you live from Fancourt, the Dimension Data Pro-Am in partnership with Bosch & Dahl, and we'll have a look at some of the wine and the winemakers from one of the great brands of South African wine. And remember, next Monday, we will be chatting to the team behind the Cape Wine Auction, and that's next Saturday at Harsendal, another great event for charity. Right now, wine is calling and some celebration. Thanks for joining us. Thanks to Derek Kilpin from Great Domains, as well as Dean Elgar and Chris Morris, official sommeliers of Cricket South Africa, for joining us tonight. See you again on Thursday. Enjoy your evening. Goodbye.